This podcast is part of E2C Network, where we share the whole Auburn experience. David Housel said it best: the whole of the Auburn experience is the thing that we experience, and has a variety of things. Yes, it's all about our sports, but it's more than just that. It's about people, places, and things. At its core, though, it is about our sports, it is about our culture, and it is about our family. And because it is about family, which means we've got to have people here to make up that family, that's why I'm here, your host as usual, Kyle Loomis, and my co-host as normal, Austin Scott, is still out on sabbatical of sorts, raising some twins that just came into the world. And I'm sure we're not done talking about that. We are hoping to have him back next week. But because of this and anticipating this, we've had some great personalities come join in for the last couple of times we've been doing this. Got another one tonight, a very familiar voice, maybe first time face that you've ever seen here at E2C Network. I'd like to welcome AJ Richardson, co-host of the No Huddle podcast on E2C Network. AJ, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. I appreciate it. I've been following along as you've kind of gone down this journey. Being a very football-focused show in No Huddle, I've really enjoyed, digging into football, and that's kind of my love and my passion. But I also love to step back and view what is Auburn. What makes up Auburn? Does it includes food? It includes the other sports besides football, and I'm really excited to get to talk about all of that. Even things that are slightly not typically Auburn, like Buc-ee's or things like that may not you think when you go to Auburn, but hey, Buc-ee's is in Auburn now. Things like that will make and kind of start to change slightly, what Auburn is. And yep. I think for a lot of it, people are a little scared to change, but there's a lot of great change going on and excitement that goes on with any kind of change as well.
Right. Well, so here's the great thing about Buc-ee's. We're not done talking about it, folks. Most of you are rolling your eyes at this point because you're like, God, this guy talked all about Buc-ee's last week. Austin and I think that is one thing that I'm saving for me and him. You've at least gotten to mention it here. And so I wanted to give you the opportunity just to at least say you talked about Buc-ee's. I mean, did you ever think that this would be happening in an Auburn situation?
Not necessarily Auburn, because it seems like Buc-ee's is kind of like one of those, just like, you drive down to the beach, you see it, or you go out to Texas and you see it. And I thought, oh, little old Auburn, I don't know if we'd ever get a Buc-ee's. Like, even when the rumors started popping up, right, I didn't think necessarily they would materialize.
Well, and think about it too. Most of the ones you've already been to, maybe I shouldn't say most, but you would think, well, maybe it's supposed to be right next to, if not inside, a major city. But most of the ones that I've been to, they're somewhat in between major stopping points, which I think makes perfect sense for this type of place if it's a stopping destination at this point. So I'm excited for it. As I've mentioned, we're not going to spend this episode talking a lot about it. We're probably the first episode back. We have Austin. He and I will just gush about Buc-ee's. More content, even beyond that, coming out there. I do want to throw this out there. We mentioned that Austin will be back hopefully next week if everything works according to plan. If not, you'll see another special guest here. That's the good news. I do want to address the bad news, and then not to brush past it, but also just to kind of not linger on it too much. The Auburn community obviously is this little village on the plains, but there are many surrounding communities, and I think this one is kind of on the way outskirts. But there was obviously a tragedy with a shooting in Dadeville, not too far from Auburn, between Auburn and Lake Martin, essentially. And there's people in Dadeville that very much are connected with Auburn stuff. So obviously this seems cliche at times, but I obviously wanted to say that our prayers go out to everyone that's been involved with that. And just a reminder for everybody, this is my personal statement. This is not, AJ is not endorsing this, but I'm going to say it from my personal viewpoint and a statement on this. I hope everybody will take a deep breath and stop pushing agendas and just realize the fact that lives were lost. And that's really the only thing that matters right now. And so I hope we can sit in that and just acknowledge that a community that's connected pretty closely to Auburn is suffering right now. And so our prayers go out to them very much. So now that we've covered that and at least addressed one of our outskirts, the Auburn family, let's talk about something else, and a bit of good and a bit of bad, some things ending in the sports world for Auburn. Darian Goborn, let's start there. She is now officially done after a 5th year with the Auburn Tigers and got to go as a single participant to potentially win a single national championship out there on the biggest stage in gymnastics. And even though she came away without the championship, I was so happy to see her get that one more time. And I imagine you feel the same way.
Yeah. Every time, if you've watched Darian Goborn, which if you're an Auburn fan, I hope you have. If you haven't, please go watch some highlight of one of her floor routines this year, previous ones, because it is truly a entertaining piece that I'm so glad that people really enjoy watching. And Darian just being kind of a showman, bigger personality than sometimes it seems in life. Like they're just bigger than life. And I think Darian is definitely one of those that people latch onto and said, wow, that's awesome. I love her story. I love how she has come and really made a name for herself. Been here for 5 years. That's pretty awesome.
It's a long time.
That's a long time, especially in gymnastics world, where you probably get them for 4 years. And if you get them all 4 years, that'd be awesome. But it's really amazing.
Right. Yeah, I'm gonna miss her a lot, and I think you and I off screen before we hit the record quote unquote button for this part of the show. This is why those of you that are listening should always come and watch the live recording, because there's things before and after. We were having like a general discussion about things quote unquote underperforming this year in terms of athletics, and I think a lot of people had expectations for gymnastics because Suni was back, because Darian was back, because XYZ, all these different athletes were back. And not that we were a shoe-in for a national title. I think a lot of people were like, oh, Auburn's going to be there just like they were last year, because basically everybody's back and then some. And I think a lot of context was missing in that, some key elements, I think it's Olivia Graves is her name, was supposed to compete this year, and she had to sit out because of an injury, who a lot of people talk about she's the next best thing at Auburn, and there's plenty of other people at Auburn's gymnastics team that are the next best thing, just to be honest with you. But it is over now, and the saddest thing is that we'll have to say goodbye to obviously Suni, but obviously Darian Goborn, who I think it's interesting when you think about it. You would think Suni would have all the star power, but Darian to me is still the star of that program, even with an Olympic athlete in your midst. That was Darian's program, and it's really cool to watch and see. Very briefly, let's mention this as well. The Auburn equestrian team, unfortunately, comes up just one match short of a national title after winning a 5th consecutive SEC title. Made it past that scary first round, the last 2 seasons getting knocked out in the first round, and made it to the national championship and lost to SMU. So not underperforming by any stretch of the imagination, AJ, as we just talked about, but equestrian just continues to at least be relevant, if not almost dominant every single year.
Yeah, they are a fun one. My parents recently went to watch them, and they were just talking about how educational it is. So if you haven't gone to an equestrian meet, I think Auburn Elvis does a great job of talking about it as well. But one of the things that my parents learned very quickly was, what is an equestrian meet? What are the events? How are they scored? And that piece is kind of pretty cool. But even bigger, take a bigger step back. This team and previous teams have kind of been in the running for a national championship. We have plenty of them to go around for equestrian. And this one, I was looking at some of at least at the beginning, we fell pretty far behind in our national championship run in our final meet. And we ended up battling back, almost came back and won against a very highly ranked SMU. And, that's just part of it. Sometimes you get caught back and you just can't battle all the way back. But hey, the battling is honestly the important part. And guess what? Those girls, would it be awesome if they got the national championship? Absolutely. But they'll also remember that their team battled when they were down really far early in this match.
Yeah, obviously very disappointing to see them come so close, battle back, but very proud. They walk away with an SEC title.
Yeah.
They walk away still being relevant in the national title picture for equestrian again. So there's nothing to be ashamed of for Greg Williams, these ladies, and this program and this fan base, because we are still that big of a deal when it comes to that. We're obviously expecting and hoping for big things again next year. And we appreciate, as you mentioned, Auburn Elvis being out there covering for everybody, but especially he does some work here for us at E2C Network with the War Horses podcast. So check that out if you have not. Let's move into our first big segment tonight. And we did take last week off because not only was A-Day, the opening of Buc-ee's. I told you we are going to mention it like 1,000 times. Easter weekend, the most awful like Saturday of rain ever. I mean, it would seem like a statue unveiling. It was just so much going on. So there was no way, given Austin still being out, that I was going to be able to ask or even expect someone on the Easter weekend to do a show. So we are back from that week off and can finally talk about A-Day. And this is honestly, AJ, this is why I wanted you here specifically. Not because I couldn't find anybody else, as I told Clint. He gets under his skin every time I tell him that. I'm like, you know that joke's coming. Just know every single time. So you actually were sought out, AJ. Just know that. Not like Clint. And you have the same last name, so go figure.
Yeah, but we're not related.
Which is just the oddest thing in the world. Anyway, and you're both Auburn fans, and that's still a common name.
And we went to college at the same time. So
there's so many commonalities between the two of you. It's scary, and I think you're both lying about not being related to each other. And it's done in the certain light when you stand next to each other in the shadow of Jordan hair. I'm like, they're somehow related. They're just not telling us. This is not the segment about how Clint and AJ are related. This is about A-Day weekend. We're finally getting a chance a week later to talk about it. I want to hear about your experience. I've shared a little bit about my experience on various things around E2C Network already, and I'll do a little bit more here. But since you're our special guest, talk to me about what you saw, you experienced at A-Day, and the storm of the century that it was, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think leading up to it, I think it was a little lackluster of like, even I feel like the media wasn't necessarily pushing it. Or there wasn't, a lot of players saying, come join us at A-Day, or even Hugh Freeze to some extent, like kind of not like, hey, you can come. It's not going to be a final product. Obviously it's A-Day, but there just wasn't a lot of excitement. And then you build on top of that, all of the kind of tough stuff of weather, A-Day, just all the A-Day event stuff,
right?
And Masters, and then Easter, obviously. And all of those really kind of build upon itself, that there were lots of just pulling around of people's focus. And then it's just dreary and people didn't want to come out. And you're like, okay, cool, whatever. But it's still a time. It's the coach's first time to get their squad out there. And from a performance standpoint, I think everybody's expectations were hopefully tempered, if they weren't already. Just like
they're never tempered enough,
no,
Austin.
No.
Like the people that were talking about this was such a abysmal. What did you expect? Yeah. Like I still don't get people that think that way. I'm not going to get on that soapbox. So go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. And that's just like the nature of it. You think, oh, spring, you got most of your team on campus, you're ready to go. Let's start throwing the ball around, scoring tons of touchdowns. And we did score 24 points, which I think is pretty good considering the circumstances. But when it comes down to like the X's and O's, I was like, all right, there are pieces here that we can obviously build on. And that's the important part. It wasn't like, oh, wow, we are in a lot of deep trouble with this. I mean, how many times I saw the offensive line pushing the defensive line around and opening up holes was so encouraging to me. We have not seen that consistently happen for a very long time, it feels like. And there were just a lot of pieces like the running back situation where you're like, wow, we legitimately probably have 3 guys already on campus that could be starters at most schools. and yet we're going to probably have some depth there, which I think is good. You just never know with running backs and how that all uh, shakes out throughout the season with injuries or whatnot.
Oh yeah.
And just the overall, I don't know, just the excitement. There was definitely some excitement around Hugh Freeze.
Right.
And I wish there were more fans. If it was a prettier day, I think there would have been a lot more fans.
I agree with you, AJ. So I'm not gonna sit here and say it was gonna be a hardcore, one of the best 8A attendance. I just think he even tempered the expectations without the rain and stuff coming given into that equation. He said, folks, we're not going to show you a lot because that's one of our biggest things that we have going for us this year is nobody knows exactly what to expect from what we're going to do here at Auburn. They've seen my tape, but they haven't seen what I'm going to do here. So we can't give that up. The one advantage that we have in a very tumultuous situation we find ourselves in, trying to pick up the pieces from another transition in a 2-year time frame. So I really think that if this had been better weather, you probably sit somewhere in the 30 to 40,000 attendance. Yeah. What was the attendance? Do you remember?
They said like 12,000 or something like that. I was like,
no, we didn't break 10,000 on that.
Yeah.
Maybe that was tickets sold. Now that's true, right? But here's the thing. I'm just going to throw this out there, AJ. Not all us, hoity-toity people get to sit up in the covered areas like you and, people close to you. So those of us that, just have to suffer out there in the elements, I can understand, but you getting to sit up there, having the audacity to send a picture to the group. Hey, happy to be here at 8A, sitting here out of the wind, out of the rain. So just thanks for that.
Well, I got to thank my grandparents. They have donated lots of money, thankfully, to the university, and that was kind of my reward, I guess. But it's not that I'm trying to flaunt that. Like, I'm obviously not. I think it was just I said it not even thinking, and
I knew you didn't. I knew you didn't. That's why I made a big deal about it. I was like, this is so not what AJ means, but I'm going to make a big deal about it just because. And I'm sitting out here miserable because I was at that point. I was going to stick it out with my poncho on out in the open. And then I just said, nope, I'm going up to where some overhang is. And I'm still getting wet, but it was awful. So you guys have talked about on the No Huddle podcast. Please do check it out if you haven't. You can find it on all podcast apps, our main E2C network feed with all the podcasts that's on that one. And even on the other E2C network YouTube channel, description links are down there for all these things where you can listen to those there as well. I would recommend that for you listeners out there who haven't heard their analysis of A-Day. That, and I say they, AJ and Jared, his co-host, they do a good job. And so please do go check their analysis out. So we won't really go into detail about that, but anything else from A-Day that you can take away from, or whether it's football related or not? I know you probably got in and got out, but what else from A-Day that you might want to mention, if anything?
I was very encouraged by our special teams.
Yeah.
And I think that the special teams piece of it was definitely lackluster under the previous administration. And so I'm very excited to see, especially with, Alex McPherson. I mean, you saw him. Yeah. Did he miss like a 50-yarder? Yeah.
In the rain, in the wind. I mean, come on.
You're in the rain. It's in the, there's so many elements against you. And he had enough power. He just missed it just a little bit wide. And it's like, okay, whatever. But it just shows you that I think we are going still down like a positive route of special teams and kind of getting better as we go in special teams. And that's the part that I wasn't necessarily expecting, but it was a good confirmation that I think we'll be okay. I think we will.
I always say this before we start live recordings. We don't pay attention to the chat a lot, but I did see a comment pop up that I want to address because I was just thinking this, that yes, special teams, especially this year, it's a good point you bring up, can be the difference in a lot of games. When you are in a situation that we find ourselves in, a lot of transition, our next topic we're about to hit in just a matter of minutes here, the transfer portal, going through transitions in every facet of this program. You have got to take advantage of the little things, special teams, extra points, punting, coverage, and then obviously taking care of the ball and tackling. If Auburn can come in out of this A-Day this summer being more fundamentally sound, taking care of those other things like special teams, and giving enough time where we're not making these other mistakes that make the situation even harder time for the defense and the offense to come along, we could have a surprising year. But still temper the expectations, folks. Coach Freeze has tried his best. And if I value a coach when they say things and they mean it, and he said that leading up to A-Day, and boy, was he right, temper your expectations, because you didn't hardly see anything except the ball run. One pass, though, which was Robbie Ashford to an individual who's in the transfer portal now. So
Yeah.
we'll mention that in a little bit. But overall, just my interpretations of the weekend, that was obviously not what it could have been. Performance from the football team, just overall experience of that weekend. And hopefully next time around, we're having a much more exciting, complete, holistic 3, maybe 4 days that you could have on the plains of Auburn, getting back together in what to me is almost like a homecoming 2.0. So we'll wait and see next year. And when year comes back around, we'll see how much better, if it is. Our last topic tonight, it is the thing that in one instance, everybody will love, but it's also the thing in the other instance that everybody will lament. When it works for you, it's great. When it's not doing exactly what you wanted to do, wow, crybabies on social media will just have at it. The transfer portal, AJ. The transfer portal's been here for what? 2 years now, maybe?
I think it's like 2 full years.
2 full years?
But there's been changes as we've gone. And
right.
Obviously this is another kind of iteration of what it is. And so, yeah, there's just, coaches, players are all trying to figure it out.
And so that's one problem that this has, whether it was NIL, because both these things kind of came about at the same time. The transfer portal, NIL, a lot of it was do something to make a response, right? And to try to say that they're doing something without having these stipulations, these considerations. At least that's how it seems for the transfer portal and stuff. And so I think that's where the frustration comes in. So, but when it works for you, it does. So what I would like for us to discuss is this. I'd like for us to talk about the good things and the bad things that have happened thus far, not just in football, but for a lot of things in Auburn sports. And I had to write down a list before we start here. So let's give you a list of what, as of the recording on Sunday evening of this podcast that we know of, have transferred out of football. Desmond Tisdale, Cameron Brown, Jeffrey Imba, Tavares Dawson. AJ, I would love for you to give some thoughts on those names and anything you take away from the initial departures of the transfer portal for Auburn football.
Yeah, it's just the world I think we live in now. I mean, I'm a very loyal person when it comes to just about anything. And, if I was a college athlete, I'd probably stay at whatever university I had originally committed to. But that's not the reality of what it is now. And you just see these players like Imba, Dawson, Tisdale, Cam Brown, and you're like, wow, these were names, when they came to Auburn, pretty highly talked about guys. And for most of them, they've had pretty limited, time to play at Auburn. They had, they've been here, but they haven't made as many plays, catches, whatever it is they're doing. And, you look at even somebody like Tavares Dawson, and I was like, he was one of Jared and my guys, especially in the wide receiver room, to watch, because we were thinking, wow, this could be another guy to really make the depth better at wide receiver. And then you look at what he did last year. He only had 2 catches for 30 yards.
Yep.
And you're like, that puts in perspective, did he have, that 40-yard catch? That was the wow moment. That was the biggest pass. That was the biggest play that we had. But like everything else is kind of just showing him like we probably need, and this is kind of the hard part of the transfer portal. Guys have to leave to open up spots for the transfers to come in. And at this point, from what I've kind of heard, Auburn has like 90 to 93-ish kind of scholarship positions, and you got to get that down. Mm-hmm. So by the time Auburn comes in the fall, we got to get that back down to a number. I think it's 85. And so you have to have players leave in order to have more come in. So this is, we just started this yesterday, the transfer portal opening up, and it's through April 30th. And I think these guys are just the start of it. And just to set your expectations, and it's going to be hard. Seeing a lot of guys like this that are big names probably leave.
Yeah.
And that's going to be hard because a lot of these players had a lot of high hopes. We had hopes for them. And so to see that kind of, move on, maybe to a different school, hopefully to a different school if they are in the transfer portal. But we've also seen guys like Dawson, who he put his name in October, came back, played the spring, now he's back in it. And you're thinking it could happen again. One of these guys like Imba, I think he's very good. I think he'll find a spot. But it would be pretty cool, a few months later, we found out Imba takes his name out of the transfer portal. So
do you really think that's going to happen, though?
It may. I feel like that's kind of the outlier, though.
Yeah. I don't get the feeling that Imba's coming back. I hope I'm wrong. I really do. That one was probably, if you want to talk about being shocked, and I was doing my best whenever I was on here at E2C Network or wherever, talking to people, prepping people, get ready. I mean, you're about to see a lot of people leave, no matter the sport, because this is the transfer portal. I mean, we're right here a day after the spring part of the transfer portal just opened up. People are going to leave. People are going to be coming in, this is just get ready, prepare yourself. But I think a lot of us had some maybe names in mind, and maybe some of the other ones are ones that you thought about. But Jeffrey Imba was one that I think a lot of people outside of those that are quote unquote in the know, were surprised by. And I understand that because he was a guy that seemed like he was up and coming, probably one of the gems of the Harsin era, one of the few things that people will probably acknowledge that was a good thing or good gets. And so it hurts to see that go. So we'll sit here and wait, see what happens with the rest of this transfer portal cycle. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about it here on this podcast or anything else we do with the E2C Network. But I did want to also mention other aspects of the transfer portal, other sports, some good and bad. Right now, Auburn basketball is in the middle of it's a nice way of putting it, AJ. Changeover of the guard is probably, and that's a play on words. I just thought about it with the loss of several names, Yohan Traore, Wendell Green. There was speculation if Alan Flanagan was going to leave, and then he was on the roster again. I still don't understand what really is going on with that situation, and there's more to come. Good thing Denver Jones has transferred in, by all accounts, speculation-wise, looks to be what we need to fill some areas that we didn't do as well this year. That's a good thing. It's not really transfer portal, but kind of mixed within this. Peyton Marshall, the 2024 center, decommitted at that time. And then you've got a bunch of other names that are apparently close to making decisions that we maybe by the time you're watching or listening to this have already happened. So I want to open it up to you, AJ, thoughts on maybe basketball stuff, if you have any, and one in particular too, the discussion and rumor of Devin Cambridge returning to the Auburn Tigers. I still just, for my own safety of not getting my hopes up about that type of feel-good story, am not putting bank on that. And I'm probably going to be wrong, and people can show this to me and say, wow, you were wrong on that one. But thoughts on basketball situation right now with the transfer portal and maybe even a little bit of Devin Cambridge?
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously affected basketball. I think you see it, quote unquote, less in basketball.
Yeah.
Just because there's less people on the roster. You see it a lot in football. It feels like during the transfer portal for football, it feels like every day or every other day somebody's leaving. And it's just kind of the reality of it. Basketball, much less. Your rosters are much less. And it is tough. You have guys that you like, Peyton Marshall, a 4-star, 7-foot tall guy, and you have high hopes of him because you have to have somebody like that. I come back to your kind of your final thought about Cambridge. I would love to see Cambridge potentially come back.
It's a feel-good story, right?
It would be so good. Because wasn't Cambridge in one of which team did he transfer to?
He went to Arizona State to play with his brother for a
Yeah.
year. And I saw people like downplaying this and like, guys, just don't get so excited about it. Don't act like that's the coolest story. I mean, it is a cool story
It would
if
be.
that's what happens. You transferred, people gave you crap for leaving. You went to play with your brother and then you came back. I mean, I don't know that that's necessarily what he planned to do, but if it works out the way, it's just a cool story. And he came back to us, come back home into the family, into
That'd be
the
so
fold.
cool. And you could tell while he was at Auburn, it's just like a lot of these players, they really enjoyed their time. They enjoyed the teammates. If he comes back, there will still be a good number of teammates that he's played alongside. And I don't know. He was a fun one. I mean,
He
he had
was.
just
He's got bounce for days, man.
yeah,
I'd love to see it.
yeah, yeah.
I'd love to see that happening again. So listen, I'm going to be all over that if it happens. I can't bring myself to believe it's going to happen just for my own protection, for my little Auburn heart to be
Yeah.
burst. And what better selling point for Auburn? We're so good. People that leave come back. Like players in the transfer portal. That's how good. Like, think about that from a marketing standpoint.
Yeah.
All over that. You're welcome, Auburn Athletics. I've just done your job for you.
Well, it just reminds me when I was in college a little bit, I went to college with Cam Newton.
Just throw it out there. Just name drop. Okay. Why don't you?
Well, and then my senior year, 2015, Cam Newton to college, graduated. It just kind of reminds me, it's the feel good story, but it's also a good story of, players that, top caliber talent, obviously Heisman Trophy winner, Cam Newton comes back to Auburn and decides to finish his degree, which most athletes, when they're that big, don't even care. They're not even going to do that. And I think that's a little piece of Auburn that just, it keeps you pulling back. I mean, even like we've seen some, Suni Lee at 8A. Like, who would have thought Suni Lee would have gone to an 8A game that was just gross? And she did.
But she doesn't care about Auburn. She's just here just to give her something to do, right? That's what everybody else was saying.
Just to pass the time between Olympics, apparently.
Right. Tim Hudson came back and did the same thing and stayed around to be an non-paid coach. He doesn't need to get paid. We all know that. We acknowledge all these things, but it's still the story remains the same here, is that Auburn is something special and different. And when professional athletes who don't need the money, don't need to have their degree, don't need to come back, and those that aren't professional yet, like in Devin, they at least can entertain the idea. That tells you there's something special and something different. And that's what we talk about here. Yeah. Last little thing. I know it's an odd transition just to kind of end on. We were on this transfer portal topic. Auburn has stole a Alabama player in the transfer portal, which is just in women's basketball, which is just hilarious to me. So congratulations to them. So there you go. A roundup of what's been happening in the transfer portal. Still plenty to talk about. And I'm sure it's changed a lot, maybe by the time you're watching or listening to this. AJ, we want to thank you so much for joining us as a guest co-host here on the Auburn Experience, episode 31. We have appreciated you, sir. And I'd love to give you an opportunity to plug anything that you'd like people to know about yourself, where they can find you.
Yeah. Of course, I do the No Huddle podcast on the UTC network. We love to cover all great things Auburn football. I know we kept things pretty high level, but on our show, we get a little bit more in depth, cover the big storylines of Auburn football. And there's just always a lot to talk about, even during the doldrums of summer. We'll come at you with some fun off-season topics. So keep your head on a swivel for that. And then also, if you want to find me on Twitter, you can follow me at AJAYJAY_.
You can follow me on Twitter at Kyle Loomis 24. We appreciate you all tuning in to episode 31 of the Auburn Experience podcast. Until we talk to you again, War Eagle.
War Eagle.